Is everybody ready? Good evening. Going to call the special select board meeting of February 26th to order at 7 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. First order of business is approval of the agenda.
Moved.
Thank you, Farhad.
Second.
Thank you, Victor. I don't have any changes. Kathleen, any changes? Okay. Anyone else? No? Good. All right. All in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Approval of the minutes from February 11th, select board meeting.
Moved.
Second.
So moved by Farhad, second by Lindsay. Questions, changes,
A very
discussion?
minor, line 139,
Okay.
Laura's name is spelled, missing one of the letters.
Oh.
Suddenly,
You do what I do and skip over where you are in the agenda?
Missing
Okay.
an S. Right.
You said the 136,
139.
or 139. Oh, yep, missing the S. I didn't even see that.
I did not see that either.
Okay. Any other changes? Good. All in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Citizen comments. Here for agenda. Sorry, I don't know who you are.
I'm Nicholas Wood. I'm from Vermont Integrated Architecture
Oh,
for the
okay.
Adaptive Reuse
Welcome.
Project.
Thank you. So nobody, everybody's agenda. Okay. Anne's not here. Are you covering for her? Is she coming?
I'm not expecting her, simply to say that you have several liquor license applications in your, as outlined on this spreadsheet. All inspections have been approved and conducted by the police and fire chiefs.
Okay. Pleasure of the board.
I move to approve all renewal applications for first, second, and third class liquor licenses, outdoor consumption, and entertainment permits as presented by Town Clerk Ann Webster.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Farhad and Nick. Any questions, comments? Good. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving on. Brent, would you like to come up? The adaptive reuse project presentation.
So, thank you very much. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brent Rakowski. I'm with Otter Creek Engineering, the firm that is working to assist it.
Speak in that thing there.
Thank you, I can do that too.
Yeah. That's it, yeah.
All right. My name is Brent Rakowski. I'm with Otter Creek Engineering. We're the firm assisting the town with the first component of the reuse project. Where we're at in our stage is a water and site improvement project is what we're calling it. This is really the initial step in the reuse project that you'll hear from Nick here in a few minutes. As a component of this project, what we were tasked to do.
You're gonna have to scroll. It's a PDF.
Scroll, okay. All right. Oh, this is gonna be a challenge, I apologize.
Do you want me to do that? And
Yeah,
You can just, you can cue me.
Okay, how about I do that? So, as I mentioned, we're assisting the town with the initial steps in the redevelopment of this site. So this is at the current Town of Middlebury Police Station. So if you can click the next or scroll to the next. And before I get to that, I guess the project components that we were tasked with was really to take down or to demolish the existing tankage and structures that were part of that original wastewater treatment plant that the town had at the current police department site. As part of that, we are also looking at opportunities to correct drainage issues that are associated with what will be potentially the reuse building, and make necessary upgrades to the water line. There is an aged water line that currently serves the that currently serves the Grit building and a pump station building down at the end of Lucius Shaw Drive. And then, as part of that, we are looking to coordinate some of these updates and improvements with the reuse project. So the reuse project would potentially have a water service to it. We're just making sure that while we're putting a new water line in, that we're also putting in a water service to that building, so that if the reuse project moves forward, they'll just need to connect on. They'll have a connection in place. And then what you'll see is that in terms of demolition of these tanks and buildings, there's some considerable voids that will be there. So if you can imagine, a 50,000 gallon sludge storage tank, once you take part of some of that, there's quite a bit of material that needs to fill that depression or void. So what we've done is try and consolidate that and fill in much of the area around, and leave one particular location somewhat open, that gives the town an opportunity to actually waste material from other projects that will be happening this summer, and save some money, I think. So if you can go to the next one, Kathleen. Project schedule. So right now we are actually in the bid phase. We had a for this decommissioning work, or the site improvement work and the water line updates. We are in what's called the bid phase. So we had a pre-construction meeting, which was a mandatory pre-construction meeting because of the intricacies involved, and you'll see that in a few minutes, or shortly, we wanted a mandatory pre-bid because of some of the particulars that are associated with it. There's a lot of piping inside the buildings. Visually, you just need to see it to really, it's something you can't get from a plan. So just being able to go in there and making that mandatory also helps kind of protect some of the town's interests in terms of people saying, well, we put in a bid and now we either want to rescind it or need to make changes. You can't plead ignorance if you're actually there, right? So we'll be opening bids this Friday. And then after that, we will be putting together, Otter Creek Engineering will be putting together a recommendation letter that will go to the Infrastructure Committee. And if all goes well and Infrastructure Committee agrees with our recommendation, I believe that would go on to the Select Board.
So are the bids due on Friday, or are you opening on Friday?
We are opening them on Friday. They are due on Friday.
And also,
Yeah, we open,
would open them at the same time.
Same
yes,
Yeah.
due and open, similar, right, okay. And then we're hoping, if all goes as planned, we're looking at an April 20 start. Obviously, that's dependent on the contractor who's selected, their schedule, but the intent is to have that site demoed and ready when the time comes for the next steps, okay? So we can go to the next one, Kathleen, thank you. So this is, I'm sure most of you know, but Lucius Shaw Lane, right at the top of your screen is the Middlebury Police Department, the current building. To the left-hand side is what I'm calling the garage, or the former garage. And then even lower on the screen there, if you want to scroll down, Kathleen, is so the tankage that I talked about. So there were a number of different tanks that were associated with the original wastewater plant. Tank 1 and 2, the digester building, larger digester, sludge storage. So you can scroll to the next one. So those are again, so then moving on, this is the engineered plan. I've added some color to it, some flash, because engineering plans are quite boring. So again, the Town of Middlebury Police Department in the upper right part of the screen on the left-hand side. Near the bottom is the garage, and then you'll see tank 1, tank 2, digester building, the digester, and then the sludge storage. Now the tank 1, 2, and tank 2, the digester building, the digester, and the sludge storage are all part of what will be demolished, what we're looking to get demolished for this project. The digester building itself is 2 different shades of purple, for those of you that aren't colorblind, I guess. The darker shade of purple is actually what is above grade. So that's actually a building if you're looking at it. Okay, next one, please. And then, sorry, Kathleen, could you go back to the earlier one? Apologize. Nope. Right there. And above the garage, on the upper part of the garage, you see a blue line. That is actually representing the new water line that is going in, okay? So we're connecting on, actually to the end of where the current water line is, and the thought is that we will be replacing that pretty much in the same location because of all the other utilities that are in the ground, some of the unknowns. There's a lot of record information. This site has a lot of history, so there's a lot of pipe in the ground that some folks aren't really sure where they are. So the thought is to let's just put it back in right where it is. That way we know we're not going to run into really any unknowns. So that's the blue line represented there, extending down towards Otter Creek, the left-hand side of the page. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, that blue line is continuing from the east or from the police station side on the right, heading to the left-hand side of the screen towards the river, and will end with a hydrant, and also have new, or I should say, reconnected water services to both the pump station building and the grit separator building. Next slide, please. And then we'll just run through these because I want to let Nick have enough time. So again, that's really this is just a blow up to show where things are. Again, I've tried to color code that so that we can relate to the next slide. Keep going, please. Similar thing, except a bit more of a blow up. It's easy with a PowerPoint presentation to just keep copying and zooming in. So this is actually what's called the control building. This is somewhat of a below grade portion of the garage. And what we're doing with tank 1 and 2, if you recall from the earlier slide, is we're actually partially demolishing these tanks. So we're not completely bringing them to the ground. And a portion of those tank walls currently serve as the foundation and basement wall for the garage. Yes, right there. Thank you, Dan. So I just wanted to point that out. Next one, please. And then this was the flashy part of my presentation, which was supposed to, zoom in and fade. So this is the backside pictures looking towards the garage. So you'll see on, if you can, a little bit on the upper left side is some vegetation, and then that is the garage in the background. On the right-hand side is tank 1. That is currently, it does not have a top on it, but it's filled with this ooze of material. What we'll be doing as part of this is actually penetrating holes in the bottom of these tanks to allow groundwater to come and go. And then similarly, this is tank 2 that you see in front on the fore part or the center of the screen. The concrete curb will be removed. So all tanks that are currently in place will be removed to 3 feet below finished grade. So the idea is we'll demolish them down to a certain level, and then there'll be 3 feet of material over the top of them. Okay, so presumably if you're running a secondary electric for lights, doing some minor grading out there, you're not gonna end up hitting a piece of concrete. You can dig through there, and hopefully when the site is complete, it'll just be a grass lawn area. Nobody will know any different. Please. Yeah, a lot of the same. I think I guess if we can skip to the next one, probably the next component that you probably want to know a little bit more about is this digester building. So the digester building as I mentioned, has an above ground portion and then a below grade portion. The below grade portion actually has a connector walk in the basement area, a connector walkway, which shown on the left-hand side with a blue dashed line, if you can see that. That will ultimately be sealed off to serve as the to separate the area that's being filled from the active basement in the garage. So you go to the next one. And that's just a architectural view or a section view of the digester building, the portion that's above grade, and then the portion that's below with the new wall going in place. Keep going, please. There's just our structural plan that shows how that's gonna happen. So, new foundation wall going in place. And some photos of that above-grade portion of the digester building. On the left-hand side, upper left-hand side, you can just make out, like, if one were to walk out the door that's right in the foreground, that area that has grass on it is actually the roof of the basement below. Okay?
And so this is getting demolished.
That will be demolished.
And from where the new foundation wall is towards like where the sludge tank will be filled.
Correct. Yep, that's the intent. I should say, sequence-wise, the intent is that the tanks, tanks 1 and 2, if you can recall from back the earlier picture, and everything will be filled with the exception of the digester building. Or I should say that the intent is to have the digester building filled to last. So what we want to be able to do is clean up the whole rest of the site, and then what's ever left, if there's any material left, that would go in the hole left by the digester. At least our calculations at this point seem to indicate that there's going to be still a sizable void left by the digester building, and that gives the town an opportunity for other projects that are happening in town to actually waste material in that location. So they can actually just back a truck up and dump it in and be done with it, as opposed to a depression or a void that's elsewhere on that site. The access to it wouldn't be as favorable. So this is the sludge storage tank. This is one of the tanks, actually the tank that has a roof on it still. So that'll be demolished and knocked back in. And then in terms of, we did some initial testing because there was potential concerns of asbestos that was in exterior coatings of tankage. So at the recommendation of KD Associates actually did the remediation of the original remediation of this site. They recommended that we do some test pits to look on the exterior of the tanks to make sure that there was no coating, which would have indicated the likelihood of maybe asbestos in that coating. So, sorry I went a little long. I apologize.
And you found none, right?
I'm sorry?
And you found none.
And we found none. Yes. Thank you.
And so I just want to comment, this work is being funded with the remaining funds from the settlement of final decommissioning money for the wastewater, the old wastewater treatment plant. So, and then once this work is complete, I think we can say we've finally decommissioned the old wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Brent.
Yeah, thank you.
Did anyone else have questions? Or?
Just one. First of all, I was putting some specifications together today for another project. I was wondering, this can include ignorance is not part of being there. Is that open source?
You're welcome to use it.
That was great. So the other project you're talking about is probably, is it the excavation from the railway?
So as you're well aware, there are other water line projects that
Mhm.
engineering is involved with
Mhm.
this town. And one of the requirements that we have with water line replacement work, when it's within a roadway, because of the nature of clay soils in Madison County,
Okay,
compaction of it is nearly impossible.
Okay.
So that material comes out and it needs to go somewhere.
okay,
When it's underneath the road, new material, slack material goes in,
Okay.
so they can compact it, you don't have heaving in the roads. That wasted material needs to go somewhere. This site actually lends itself ideally to those projects where, the town doesn't have to pay to waste it
Right.
somewhere else.
Right,
It can
okay.
just go here.
thanks.
Okay, and the reason we're doing this is, it's an environmental benefit, obviously, to finish this project, and it also gives us some use for the land,
Yes,
hence its name, adaptive reuse, so.
yes. So before we can do the adaptive reuse project, we need to do everything that Brent just talked to us about. It's basically the prep work for this project.
I'm glad we're getting to it, and thanks to you, because you've been pressing for this.
Thank you. I'm excited to see it moving forward, so.
Keeping our fingers crossed.
Yes.
It's a very favorable price.
Yep. So, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Nicholas Wood.
Thank you. Do you want to take us through the adaptive reuse project part?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I'm from Vermont Integrated Architecture. I've been working with Asher Nelson on this, along with consultants like Brent Rakowski, Dan Werner at the town, Tom Hanley, police chief. Ballot Article 10 is the adaptive reuse project for the Middlebury Police Department. Brent really identified most of those buildings on that site plan, but are people familiar with those? Police, okay, very good. So as an overview, bond vote for $850,000 for rehabilitating the former wastewater treatment facility buildings for use by the police department. That's the overview. Programmatic needs identified and addressed by this project were need for a police cruiser garage, i.e. covered parking for the vehicles, storage and support space, hazardous material storage, explosive storage, and to address heat loss at the meeting room of the police department itself. Early in the project, we considered demolishing the buildings and starting fresh, but upon further analysis, the buildings were deemed salvageable, even valuable, and additionally, the buildings weren't then landfilled, saving the cost and waste of demolition. And as the title says, we found that particularly the control building is a very solidly built building with some value there. Okay, so the first building to look at, the former sand filter building, currently used as a garage, but not really particularly well configured for it. So we're looking at reconfiguring that, upgrading it in order to accommodate 5 patrol cars, replacing the roof, and putting in new overhead doors. So the reconfiguration involves putting the overhead doors on that south face, which is on the left-hand side there. So they all park parallel rather than coming in from the end, makes a lot more sense. Infill the existing overhead door. And the roof replacement, well, we looked at just maintaining that roof. There wasn't really a good way to stop snow dumping in front of the doors. So we're putting a low slope roof that pitches to the rear of the building for that reason.
Makes sense.
And we'll also give more life to the building and
Well,
the
we're
roof itself.
on that slide, so is the intention to heat that building, or it's just a storage, right?
Low level heat, there'll be some kind of Modine units in there. And it is getting insulated, so there's insulated assembly going to the interior of those walls. Low level heat's probably 50 degrees, I would say.
What I'm looking for is the ability to say that this actually helps in terms of rapid response, obviously, because the vehicles are ready to go, but it also reduces carbon footprint because you don't have to spend as much time warming the vehicles.
That's true. Yep, I would agree with that.
That's what I want to say.
And certainly having some insulation on those walls will help with that as well. Okay, floor plan of that. I guess I basically said that. 5 overhead doors there, new personnel door, all existing windows to remain, and insulation around the perimeter. That's it really, in essence. Okay, so the former control building is currently used somewhat as storage. It's got a very leaky roof at the moment. So first order was replacing the roofing membrane and again insulating those exterior walls, having the building operate better from that point of view. Replacing doors and windows, and when I say replace windows, the windows are currently boarded up. There was a consideration to block them in permanently, but we felt that in terms of future use of the building and also just using it day to day, it's better to have some natural light in there. So yeah, putting some windows back in there. Cleaning and repainting the interior, which has suffered a bit, particularly from that water ingress that's happened over time, but will now be solved. And improving access for the command vehicle, so that's a fairly valuable vehicle that the police department owns. It's currently a little bit too tall for that overhead door. They squeeze it in and they've already done some damage to the rack that sits on the top. So if you go to the floor plan, I can point out that at that third door on the right-hand side, there's a zone where we are replacing, demoing out the existing slab and putting in effectively a very low ramp just to lower the threshold of that door and give a little bit more clearance for that vehicle to get in a better way. We've got forensics and training ability in that first bay and kind of storage and support space in the what was former kind of office control portion of the building. And you can see, I won't go into it, but you can see how this dovetails with what Brent was talking about. There are those digester tanks there that are coming out. And a key part is, well, for our project, we're not really doing anything with the basement. It was just not worth going there. There's that foundation wall going in that Brent's talking about that effectively seals up that basement. Okay, there is a storage magazine for the storage of seized materials such as ammunition, flammables, explosives potentially, other hazardous materials. That is to be placed at the top, what are we saying, north west corner, sorry, of the, what do they call that yard, Dan? The impound lot, thank you, yep, that's it. It's a prefabricated structure, obviously very burly, sits on a concrete pad, that's about all there is to that. The hazardous storage, this is again adaptive reuse of a building where a lot of the pipes terminated previously. Some of those are still existing. They all get taken out and capped. We put in a ventilation, natural ventilation through a kind of a vent turbine, and that allows for them to store hazardous non-volatile materials. So it's all about getting these things in a safe place out of the police department. Okay, and the last item, infilling in the interior face of 2 existing sections of storefront windows in the police department conference room with an insulated wall assembly. This was a project that was prioritised by the Energy Committee based on an energy efficiency audit of the police department. I think that pretty much explains that. So there will be some natural light still, the top windows remain, the rest of it gets insulated wall, which will just help greatly with particularly the comfort levels in that room, but also energy usage. Okay, next slide is a summary of the budget. So working with a estimator, we have an estimated construction cost of $734,400. Design cost includes our fees, civil engineering fees are associated, I should clarify that. Civil engineering fees are associated with our part of the project. There are some regrading into concrete aprons to those buildings, for example. There's some connections to stormwater. It's a very small part of the civil, I would say, but there's a portion of that. There's some structural consulting to do with roof design and analysis of those buildings for structural stability and safety, and some MEP engineering as well. And owner's cost is estimate of miscellaneous other costs associated with the project. So that's a total budget of $842,976. The proposal is to pay the debt service with local option tax, responding to community members' input by utilising cash on hand to reduce borrowing expense. Borrowing term will be minimised, drastically reducing interest expense. Interest on an $850,000 7-year bond is approximately $179,000 less than the interest on a 20-year bond for the same amount. And that is all.
So just briefly, for people that are at home watching us, we kind of just jumped right into the action, not giving any introduction to how we got here. In 2000, the wastewater treatment facility was relocated to northern part of the industrial park, right on the New Haven town line. And we walked out the door and closed it, and have just left the buildings there until now, and all of the support structures. And so we're finally finding the commitment to address those issues and make the storage good, usable storage space for the police department.
Great, thank you. Questions?
Thank you very much.
Good presentation.
One comment, just wondering about, I think when Asher had come to infrastructure, he had some, like, board, views, like front view side, I can't remember what they're called.
Elevations
Yes,
of the
thank you,
buildings, yes.
elevations. Do we have anything like that that we could display at town meeting?
We can certainly arrange that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you could connect with Kathleen and, if we could show some elevations of the proposed, garage, I don't know that we need all the elevations, but maybe just for front and something that shows the slope of the roof. Like, I think if you have a front elevation, it wouldn't show the design of the roof slope.
That's a good idea, yep.
Just so people can look at something out in the lobby before the meeting, that would be great. And I think Asher may have had some boards when he came and talked to infrastructure, so it may not even need to be anything that has to be generated.
At that point, they were effectively just our drawings. So we did have, I know we showed this
Okay.
site plan, for example. Regardless, we can arrange our drawings onto a board or
Okay,
one way or another.
that would be great.
No
That would be
problem.
wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Just something people could look at and talk about before, or during or after the meeting. Thank you. Okay.
You dropped something.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I just think it's useful to provide that history that Kathleen just did at the very beginning, like when we're starting the discussion. Be good
And we can talk about it when we get into
into the presentation,
the
town meeting.
yeah, but Laura's comments about improved response time and decreased idling time during inclement weather may be things that would be good to add to those slides. So,
I know Tom has said that they have to run the cars more than they would like to, just to keep the ice off the windshield, so when the call happens, they can go.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Seems you can get
So those were
longevity out of just
great
being in a
points. I
dry
think we
space.
should add 'em.
Because
Yeah.
you've experienced that with Public Works,
Yeah.
some of the machines.
Okay.
Without reducing the font size.
Yeah, no, thank you.
You have to watch how
Appreciate
much we add.
Appreciate it. Thank you both for being here. Okay. Dan, flood resiliency and water projects.
Sure. So Article 9 is a vote for the flood resiliency project. So for the summary of this, it's roughly a $2 million project in East Middlebury. The first bullet is repairing the existing flood wall. That is just immediately downstream of the Gristmill Bridge on the, let's call it the north side of the Middlebury River. So repair that wall and then extend it another 150 feet downstream. Cost of that is roughly $1 million. Second portion is to armor sections of the Ossie Road berm, approximately $800,000. That is further to the east. It's further to the west, meaning downstream. It's basically if you went from the church and headed directly towards the river and then walked downstream, that's about where it is. So it's near the western edge of the East Middlebury Village area. Portions of that berm have been eroded significantly in recent years. So that is going to get re-armored. And then another portion is removing some sediment from the chute entrances. There's one just a few hundred feet downstream of the Lower Plains Bridge. And then there's another one not quite as far as the berm location. Needs to be cleaned out. And then there's several large bars of gravel. You can actually see them in the photo that are going to be cleaned out. So that cost is roughly $200,000.
So Dan, the flood wall is right here,
Yes,
west of the Gristmill Bridge?
yes. And it'll be extended another 150 feet further downstream,
And the berm is,
right in there.
at the end of Ossie Road in East Middlebury.
The chutes are, let me get it on here, there's one up here, there's one right here, it's like an overflow chute. A lot of tree debris collects in here. So we're gonna take that down a little bit.
I have a question. The clean out cost of $200,000 for the sediment, can we expect that same sort of cost every time we need to clean out the chutes?
Probably.
Okay.
And so one of the things with working with the state and FEMA was that, we've always wanted to get in there and clean out the river. And the pendulum's kind of gone back and forth. And so everybody's kind of getting on board, well, okay, we will fund you, but you, the town, have to commit to the clean out. And so what Amy and the river scientists have worked out is there's an elevation that will be set. Once we get to that point, it's time to clean the river out. Now, it all depends on how much it floods and deposits and so on and so forth. It could be 10 years, could be 20 years. You don't know. But the agencies wanted a commitment from the town, which I believe the Selectboard adopted, that they would take that on.
Right.
So certainly not intended to be an annual or
Right.
biannually thing or
Hope
whatever.
not.
Yeah. So the project need is obviously East Middlebury is vulnerable to flood damages. The wall took a real hard beating with Irene, and actually in a couple other storm events after that has scoured the bottom of it. And of course, taking the sediment out allows more area for deposition, and we have other smaller flood events. So if we want to go to the bond vote page, we are still waiting final confirmation from FEMA that they are still going to fund us for $1.5 million. Local match would be $500,000. I submitted a clean water application. It's CWSRF, State Clean Water State Revolving Fund application just a couple weeks ago. We started talking with the state, maybe about a year ago, whether they might be able to help fund some of this, our share, through their project, and they said, tell us more, so we submitted an application. If it works out, we could get 200,000 of our 500,000, but we don't know yet. But at least we put the paperwork in.
I thought we did commitment from FEMA?
They approved the scope of the project.
Okay, so we've made progress, but not necessarily final commitment. Okay,
Correct.
okay. Well, that would be good if we got that 200,000, that would be good. Okay.
So one of the, and we're gonna talk about this when we get to the water funding too, it's important to relay to the voters that they need, we want them to pass the bond, because having the bond allows us to get access to, that possible 200,000. That's the way the state revolving funds work. They want a bonded project, knowing that there's a commitment and there's oomph behind the vote. With it.
So further to that, part of our goal with all of these projects is to minimize the cost to the taxpayers and the ratepayers by accessing grants when possible, and using other sources of reserves.
Right. So current thought is that the debt service for the project would be offset by the local option tax receipts.
We would pay the debt service with,
Local
Yeah.
option
Yeah.
tax receipts, yep. So, one of the talking points is that the borrowing term, which was expected to be 7 years, interest on $500,000 is about $105,000 less than a 20-year bond. And could be much less than that if we're able to get some loan forgiveness on the, from the CWSRF.
Fingers crossed. Okay. I like the pictures. Tells us why. Okay.
All right, next,
Thank
you
you.
wanna go on to
That's good.
water, any more thoughts on that, or we'll go on to the water project?
Nope, go on. Go ahead.
Okay, Article 6 is Cross Street Bridge Fund Reserve for water system improvements. The idea is to use $1 million from the Cross Street Bridge Reserve Fund for water improvements in the Court Square area. So we're looking at intersection of Main Street and North Pleasant, Seymour Street, Court Street to Court Square, down to Cross Street and Washington Street, from Court Square to Seminary Street. As you know, everybody needs to be reminded of, Class 1 paving by V-Trans happens in the spring of 2021, and we're trying to beat that schedule. So
So the first
basically,
phase,
first phase is, if you want to start at the Congo Church area right there, we're going to go across the street and then down the sidewalk in the green. Half of that sidewalk needs to be replaced anyway, and we don't want to be digging in the road. Part of that road has a concrete structure to it, and there's just asphalt laid over it now. Just want to stay out of it. Pretty expensive excavation right there. So we're going to go down the sidewalk. There's some trees we have to move around. We've met with Chris Zioli about that. He's okay with it. And then we're going to come out into the South Pleasant Street, North Pleasant Street, Merchants Row, Court Square intersection, and then head up the south curb line, in the grass. And then from that point where you have your cursor, we're going to have a boring done underneath Court Square, the road portion of Court Square, into the square. There's a Norway maple that's kind of orangey brown in that lower right hand. That tree's going to come out. We've talked to Chris about that. So we're going to do a boring underneath that road so there won't be any interruption to traffic. And then the water main would continue northeasterly over to Washington Street. That's phase 1. I'll call it phase 1A. Phase 1B is continuing from that intersection down the parking lane of Court Street, all the way down to Court Street. That would be 1B.
All the way down to Cross Street.
Cross Street, what did I say?
Court Street.
Yeah, Cross Street.
That's- yeah.
Thank
We
you.
knew what you meant.
Yeah. So the first part of 1A, we expect will start in September of this year, and then 1B would restart in the spring. The work would be done at night. Engineers figure that that's going to be, and the contractors that we've kind of tapped for ideas, thought that would be the best way to do it at night. A lot less traffic to deal with.
You said spring of next year, right?
No, September.
The first portion from like the Congo Church over into Court
Yep.
Square would be near the middle of September.
Yeah, the 1B I'm talking about.
1B would be spring of,
1A from the Congo Church would start in September.
I know, I'm talking about the 1B.
B.
That's next spring, right?
yes,
But you said AOT is going to pave next spring also?
yes. So,
You're gonna beat that?
yeah, so we've talked with them, and they're gonna have, in their contract, that the state contractor cannot be in this area prior to July 15.
Okay, so that's summer.
So the first thing that'll happen with the class 1 paving, which we believe is they'll be milling a lot of the road surface right off. So basically from the town line, or the town state jurisdiction on 125 College Street and Route 30 down by the golf course, all the way through town, through the roundabout, across Cross Street Bridge, and Main Street to where we stop with the bridge project is all going to get milled. On Route 7 from North Pleasant Street, top of the hill by High Street, all the way down to Creek Road. So all that's going to get milled, probably the first thing that happens. But they have to stay out of that section. And there's curbing that's going to be done and catch basins to be, elevated and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the schedule of the Class 1 paving. And then in a subsequent year, we would do Washington Street, where we left off at Court Square, and that will go down to Washington Five Corners, which is Seminary Street intersection. So we're proposing to use, like I said, $1 million from the local option tax, and the rest would come from the Water Capital Fund. The part of this is ask the voters to approve a bond vote, or vote on a bond for $2.5 million. It's very similar to what we just spoke about with the Middlebury River. We have to approve a bond vote if we want to have access to the DWSRF, that state revolving loan fund, for some possible loan forgiveness on that. So we're thinking that we would use, because that can be a 2 to 3 year process, that way we would fund the portion of the Washington Street section, the last section, with a DWSRF fund loan if we can manage that. But you still have to approve the bond vote in order to get access to that. Okay. Some pictures of some main breaks. Any questions on that?
Wasn't there some discussion, Dan, of actually getting onto this Court Square stuff prior to the bridge work this year?
Yeah, we talked about it, that maybe the time when Merchants Row was closed, that it would be beneficial to get in at that time, because our contractor could be working there, wouldn't have to worry about Merchants Row traffic.
Yeah.
But we talked about it with the state staff and contractor, and the traffic patterns that they're gonna need to get those pieces delivered is really, gonna create some havoc with another excavating company there. So even though, because they need time to maneuver pieces, someone are gonna come around from from this side, some are gonna come from this side, and it was just better to just stay out of there.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So that's why we decided we'd just wait until September.
So, oh boy.
Gotta do it.
Yep.
You know, it's, this is the problem across the country as a whole, is we've ignored these major infrastructure things for so long, and it's coming due. So I really applaud the effort that everybody's been doing to get this done, and it will put us in a much better position in the future. And even how, you know, Kathleen and Dan, everybody's been looking at ways to help finance this. Is, you know, we're gonna be better than a lot of other towns in the future, so I appreciate this effort.
Yeah, it's coming right on the heels of the, Rail Bridge project is obviously not ideal, but we've got to get the work done before the state paves. And we just need to make it happen, but just think, once the rail bridges are in and this water line is in and the roads are repaved, we're really gonna have, you know,
We'll be in paradise.
yeah.
We're
Yeah.
gonna be in a good position, even as we think of ways that make the town attractive to future residents, future businesses. Stable infrastructure is real high on the list.
And we'll have more to do,
We know we will.
So,
Oh, yeah, no, there's,
it's not ending with this.
no, I'm afraid it's not, but that's.
And
good.
Jen's project, granted, she'll talk about later, is getting some of the rest of the sidewalks in this area and the
Right.
granite curbing done.
Yeah.
Downtown will look pretty sweet
It
when we're
really
done.
will.
Okay, so, any questions about related? Okay,
No.
so let's move on to recommendations from the Infrastructure Committee for the Route 116 Dow Pond Waterline Bid Phase Agreement with Green Mountain Engineering.
Sure. Just a reminder, this project is for replacing the water main along 116. We're going to start at the south end where the little building is, across from Beth Dow's place, basically. And we're going to go north to the deep culvert crossing that's at the end of Dow Pond. As you know, that thing kind of sort of somewhat collapsed about a year and a half ago, and they had to lower the water in the pond, so on and so forth, so it wouldn't wipe out the road. So this project is out to bid. We'll find out Friday what the bid results are. But we'll need to ask you to approve an amendment number 1 for Green Mountain Engineering for the bid phase process. This figure is $4,000. It's a not to exceed number. They would, of course, bill hourly. So we're well underway with the bid phase project, but that's what I'm requesting you to approve tonight. The state, FYI, the state has decided they will not do this project this year. They're not gotten to it as fast as they would like. We're going to go ahead and do ours. They asked us to do that, so we'd be out of their way. There is still a component in this project that would happen with the contractor who does the state work. This is all preliminarily to get our water main up to the point where that culvert work would happen. So anyway, I'm asking you to approve amendment number 1 for Green Mountain Engineering.
Sure. I'll move to approve amendment number 1 to the contract with Green Mountain Engineering for the Route 116 Dow Pond Waterline Replacement Project for not to exceed cost of $4,000.
Second.
Thank you, Nick and Farhad. Any other questions of Dan? Good. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Next is the Katy Road arch pipe purchase.
Correct. So I'm requesting you to approve a purchase of the pipe arch for this culvert. It's called number 2. It's the furthest one east from Route 7. The same company that we used, we did Halliday Road 3 years ago. Their proposal includes the cost of the pipe arch. It's a 6'7" by 5'8" pipe arch, so it's like a squashed egg, if you will. And it's about 50 feet long. So the town would purchase it directly from Contact. Also included in the proposal is a installation of $13,000. So they send the crew up. Our contractor digs the trench in the road, and then their guys get in there and put the thing together. It's just the most efficient way to do it. It's not something contractors around here do very often, if at all, so this is why we approach it this way. So this project is scheduled to happen around the fourth week of June. We cannot be in the stream bed until July 1. So we're trying to coordinate it that this all gets delivered and all set up to, as soon as July 1 hits, we're starting to dig a hole in the road. So the road will be closed for about 2 weeks at that, roughly around July 1st. So anyway, I'm asking you to approve the quote here from Contec for $46,488, so we can get the pipe ordered and scheduled.
I'll move to contract that. Everything you just said.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Farhad.
Okay.
Just quickly mention, this is a sole source purchase, but it is a specialty purchase. And we do have, obviously, like Dan said, a history with this company,
Yeah.
so, okay?
And you said Katy Road will be closed for 2 weeks?
Approximately 2 weeks in around July 1. And I should have said earlier, this is part of a Better Roads grant. 60,000 of it is coming from the state, and the rest is our share. So around 100,000 will be town share.
Any other questions?
So the businesses on there will they know this is coming?
Well, there really aren't any businesses on Katy Road. It's more of like
Quarries.
we'll have to put some electronic signs up letting people know the closure, et cetera.
Yes, yes.
Just inconvenience for
It-
people to
Yeah,
bypass.
it will be a inconvenience to go around.
Yeah, we'll let, Carrera know and quarries know out there that
People are
there's
gonna
going to be that
have to go
period.
down to East Middlebury.
Right.
Susan?
Can you let the Elmer Farm know as well? So
Yes.
they can let their CSA members know?
Who's that?
Elmer Farm?
Elmer Farm?
Okay.
They're just south of Katy Road on 116.
Okay.
So good. Any other questions? Good. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Downtown Transportation Grant Fund and Better Connections Grant Program Application. Jennifer and Kathleen, are you?
She did out your homework to get the information. I'm happy to sit here, but I may look at it.
It's a team effort, we know that.
So the Downtown Transportation Fund is, it's a 50% grant match program. And the idea is to get a grant that'll help us construct sidewalk and curb at the limits of the disturbance area for the Rail and Bridge project. So it's just taking the good things that'll be going back in the ground at ground zero and extending it a little bit further. And Dan selected the locations, and it came out to about the right price, so I'm writing the grant.
Okay.
So this is obviously the Otter Creek. Yellow is the concrete sidewalk that will be replaced from Mill Street up to about the National Bank. That's where the cutoff is for the bridge project. The red is granite curbing, same length. The blue is concrete curbing across the bridge. You can't do granite curbing across the bridge because it's not watertight. We gotta keep the water out of the bridge, so that's why that goes in as concrete. And then on the upstream side of the river, again, there's granite curb and sidewalk and granite curb and sidewalk on the north side of the Otter Creek. Can you go back one slide? This is the post office. And so we're going to start here with granite curb, wrap it around to Seymour Street, and then across the street from the post office, we'll get this parking area here done in granite curbing too. And if you go down 2 more slides to where the bridge project starts on the green side, we're gonna do the same thing.
We're gonna not do that though until the water line is in though, right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
At
So
least
we're-
on the green.
Yeah, we talked with Kabricki and trying to get a scout from them and don't have it yet.
Okay.
While
Gonna
back, they were
be-
saying next
Gonna be
summer.
juggling a few things
Yeah.
there.
So Kubricki's gonna be doing the work then, is that the intent? Yeah.
We have a proposal from them,
Keep grinding going, makes sense, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So, pleasure of the board.
I move to authorize the submission of a 2020 Downtown Transportation Fund grant application seeking $200,000, including a $100,000 local match for a project to remove and replace sidewalks and curbing adjacent to the bridge and rail project construction area. I further move, should I second that first, or? is there a-
Should we do those as two, Kathleen? I've heard
Sure.
them. Okay,
I'll second it.
okay, thank you, Nick. Any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye?
Any opposed? Okay,
I further move that the board sign the resolution for Downtown Transportation Fund grant.
Second it again?
it's from Nick, and thank you. Any other questions? No? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you, Dan and Jennifer. So a Better Connections grant application.
Yep, this is actually a Better Connections implementation grant. The Better Connections grant was our downtown master plan, and then the communities that receive Better Connections grants get a one-time shot at some free fund money to implement something from their plan or whatever they did with their Better Connections grant money. So the only constraint is that it needs to be constructed by September. So it's like a quick turnaround kind of a thing, so it can't be too complex. There's $30,000 available to 3 communities. They're indicating that they're gonna split it evenly, so I'm applying for 10. And after batting it around a little with the Planning Commission and some others, we were thinking a kiosk, an informational kiosk at the Amtrak rail platform, and covered bike parking at the Amtrak rail platform would be a good way to encourage people to be active and kind of meet some of the goals of the plan, such as, you know, improving bike ped accessibility in downtown. And I've talked to one contractor, I mean, I know we have to competitively bid it, but I've talked to one contractor who is super excited about it. I talked to Silver Maple, and they were like, yeah, we want to help, like, you know, and I don't know, I think we can have a lot of fun with it, thinking about what kind of permanent signage goes in the kiosk and how it might look. So it's just a fun, feel-good project, and people will be able to see it right away. I know the platform might not be done by September, but the grant agency has agreed for us to just stage it elsewhere in downtown and then move it there afterward, and the contractor says that's possible. And I'm even thinking of, you know, what we heard from you know, people at the meeting we just had for the rail station, saying, like, wouldn't it be nice if we could put a solar panel on top? So we'll be making it strong enough to hold a solar panel in the future if we want, like an e-bike charging station or something. So we're thinking ahead as well.
Okay,
Of course, I love it. And I love that you would incorporate solar and electric charging as part of, you know, the
Potentially in the future.
thing potential, yes. So
would you like to make a
I
motion?
will move it, that we sign the letter of support for a Better Connections grant is that it? Grant application or implementation grant?
Thank you. Better.
To fund the construction of bike parking and a wayfinding kiosk at the new passenger rail platform.
Thank you, Laura. Was that a second from Victor? Thank you, Victor. Any questions for Jen? Good. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Vic.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. I'm only a little behind. Discussions and preparations for town meeting. So this is our opportunity to fine tune our assignments and the agenda for town meeting. And also review the draft of the presentation. I'll turn it over to Kathleen and
I don't have anything to add to that. To note that Susan Shashak, our moderator, town clerk, Ann Webster, Chris English, and I went to the auditorium this morning and laid out the stage as the select board indicated, with the moderator on the left-hand side of the stage looking at it and the select board presenter on the other side. And that worked well. The screen was unobstructed, good angles for MCTV. Anything to add, Susan?
Hi, Susan Shashak. I don't have anything to add. Can you hear me? Just want to support what we went through today and see if anybody had any questions. Can you hear me, Victor? I don't have anything to add. I just want to see if people have questions and support the layout that we were working on today.
No?
Say it's gonna work, that's fine.
So, I did ask Kathleen, and she did mention there's 2 steps, 3?
I think there's three steps, but there is a railing.
There is a railing.
There is a
okay,
railing.
that's all.
And I'm more than willing to get up if that,
Well, I'll
Suit you
call
would?
for help. No, I mean, I don't like walking downstairs without a rail because of my knees.
Yeah.
And it's just on the safer side. And otherwise, I mean, I could put on a show for demonstrate my
When the audience,
acrobatic skills,
sorry,
but otherwise.
okay.
when the audience members speak, are we able to see them on the screen, or?
I don't think so. I think you're going to have all of your paperwork and
Yep.
is going to be up. They're going to see, you're going to want them to see all of the information.
Yeah, that's gonna be on
So-
the screen.
The program will be live streamed on YouTube and then taken from YouTube and put on the local channels. So they could go out into the lobby and watch themselves on the screen.
I'm talking about us.
Yeah, you won't be
So
able
would
to.
I know who's talking behind, unless I turn around, right?
And yeah.
Okay.
The nice part about it is I've been watching some of the old town meetings, and Jim always had trouble seeing the select board members if they had questions. And you
Yep.
guys will be in my direct line of sight, so if you have questions, but I also think you'll be off to the side. You should have a pretty good view of the room,
Okay.
except for the people right behind you. But
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to giving it a try.
yeah, I think it'll be fun.
Great. So do you have any questions of us or anything for preparation, or just?
No, I think Kathleen's gonna finalize the names that I have to ask for permission for them to speak. But that's probably about it. I think we've covered everything else. It's just a matter of going through it. And there'll be some things we'll need to adjust that day, I'm sure. But I think everyone's been very flexible.
So the assignments are in the draft agenda. We've talked about some potential backup plans and a little bit of shuffling. We'll get out a up-to-the-date assignment list in the next couple of days. In the meantime, if you have any comments, questions, concerns about the presentation, I have the notes from the PD reuse project that you gave me tonight. Please get them to me by noon tomorrow so that we can finalize the presentation for posting on the website. There are no last-minute snafus.
Yeah, so that's comments, suggestions, anything on this to Kathleen by noon tomorrow. Okay?
So I really like the format of the presentation, Kathleen, that you've kept the font really big so people can see it from a distance, which we heard people wanted. And I was just at the school board presentation, and I had a problem seeing their presentation. So I like that we're making all this effort to really think through how we set things up and present things. The other thing that I saw last night is inconsistency in passing the microphone, and people think that they can be heard, but we really need to be sure that people do use a microphone when they're speaking, and give them enough time to get to that microphone.
So we did discuss microphones today. There will be 3 on stage, hardwired, and 2 mics to be passed. They'll have justices of the peace passing the mics
Like
to
last
the
year,
audience.
yeah. Okay.
And part of what I'm going to be saying about in the very beginning is talking about that of, you know, after I recognize you, please stand up, wait for a microphone, state your name for the record, and speak up so everyone can hear, along with a few other sort of housekeeping things, just to, and I'll remind them as we go through.
Okay. I only have one other small thing, and it relates to the town poll. And we talked about doing a little overview of the website, but I'm not sure that we've really built that in, or is it logistically too clumsy to do that at this point? You know, to show the homepage and a little bit of navigating the website. I'm not sure we need to do it, but, you know, I know that we talked about it, since it is a valuable resource and a lot of people may not know what's there unless we walk them through a little bit. And I'm not seeing this as being more than 2 minutes. So I wondered about that.
I know that was talked about last year, so I just watched the meeting, so.
Is the presentation gonna be available online? So that, I mean, one thing we could do is suggest that people who wanted to navigate to the presentation could do it, and then they'd be on the site anyway.
Mm.
And I think for people who have trouble seeing, being able to read along on their phone would be another avenue for people to be able to, you know, interface with material and know what's going on.
I would just say, if you want me to say something, just tell me exactly what you want me to say, and I can include that in there.
Well, this might be a good opportunity for Laura,
Ooh.
since she's been advocating for that, to get up right up at the beginning of the meeting and mention that after some other preliminary comments we're having. So maybe do a slide about featuring the website homepage, and then you could point people exactly where they need to go to get on the presentation.
Oh, that would be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Just
Mhm.
tell me where you want to be inserted, and I will make sure
So
that
I
happens.
will, I'll be
Kathleen.
updating the
Sounds great.
presentation anyway,
Okay.
and we'll add a slide on
That's great.
with the homepage.
I had one other, I know Brian brought up last time, you know, making sure that we're communicating with people who are coming in to vote, the difference between like voting for the bond and actually borrowing that amount of money. So what is in place for people who maybe don't make it to town meeting, but are then coming in and voting?
So part of the reason for the presentations tonight was to give voters that may be voting now or on Tuesday and not at the town meeting. This is that,
it.
and I'd
Okay.
like to reach out to MCTV and ask that we play this a couple of extra times if the schedule allows.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Go ahead.
What print material are we imagining making available?
We have copies of the warning and the budget,
And the budget, not the full town report?
correct?
Could there be a few sets of the full town report
Yes.
available?
We'll have a few,
A few.
a very few.
I know it's a lot of paper.
I think that would be a great thing to point to on the website if we're gonna do that,
Right. Yeah.
in that slide, and so
Mhm.
people,
Can
you
s-
know, see exactly where to find it.
Yeah.
'Cause they could certainly bring it right up on their electronic devices.
Mhm.
I would like to maybe talk with you further, Kathleen, about, displays for water and our, I would like to help maybe set this up or, assist with the setup of like our bank window display. Some of the pictures and materials, we saved all those, right, from the water?
Mhm.
I would like to maybe figure out a way to display those, because we're having refreshments again.
We are? Is it Mesa?
Yes. And I hope maybe when people maybe we could even put them in that hallway, like you enter the door and you kind of walk down that hallway. Although
I'm-
there's not a lot of room there, so
I
maybe
was
they
gonna
have a good-
suggest that we avoid actually putting any displays in that corridor because it congests that. You know, like, and that we actually move everybody to the cafeteria and we just use the tables that are in the cafeteria.
So I would,
That's a really good idea, and that brings me to a thought that Bill Kernan had done a rotating display of pictures and such. I wonder if we can add to that and just put it on the monitor in that, in the cafeteria.
oh, yeah.
There's a monitor there.
Yep,
Yeah.
there's a monitor there.
His,
Oh.
add to his, yeah, that would be great. So,
That would really simplify things for everyone, if we could just have it on a flash drive
Yeah.
and present it that way.
can we still do some boards, like for the adaptive reuse and, some of the materials from the water? And I'm happy to come help set some of this stuff up. So I'll connect with you. What was the other big, flood resiliency? I don't know that we have anything really for that.
We have some aerial shots and diagrams of where the work is going to take place.
Could go in the display.
There are a lot of groups, you know, committees and agencies that like to do display too, so there could be a lot going on that just needs to get managed and coordinated with Anne.
Okay.
I'm glad we have childcare this year.
Yeah, that's exciting. So what else do we need to, so one thing I was thinking about today is I picked my daughter up from school early because she wasn't feeling well, and the amount of sickness going around my place of work right now. Trying to be careful and get through next week, but,
Is this a germ-free
Yeah.
warning?
we,
In the event,
in the event, we should maybe have a backup plan, just make sure that everybody is fairly well versed enough in the presentation and the slides.
oh, I thought
and,
you were gonna say,
and-
well,
you know,
meaning no sickness.
you all know, well, that's what I'm aiming for. I figure Wednesday morning.
Who can I call in sick for?
Yeah.
No.
So, anyway,
Wise advice.
just anything you can do to back up in the event that someone's not well.
Oh, we have a really flexible group, and you've all stepped right up for
Yeah.
your pieces.
We'll be fine.
I'm sure it won't be an issue, but just another. Okay. So anything else we need to talk about, prepare for, any other questions related to next Monday night? Good? Good. All right. Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Year-to-date budget reports, general fund, water fund, wastewater fund, and equipment fund.
Really no update from our last reports. These are the end of January budget reports, 58% of the fiscal year. All funds are on track overall. Still anxiously awaiting the results of the winter and the salt budget. At January 31, we had spent $133,000 on salt compared to $126,000 last year. And as Bill Kernan noted, we went into the winter last year with a full store. We did not do that this year, so. More to follow. And same with all of the rest of the funds, in good shape, including in the equipment fund. As you may recall, last year we had some expensive repairs. This year we're more consistent and on budget.
Kathleen, you know, on line 21, the newsletter, what is that? Is that like?
That is, it should be renamed Public Outreach. That is the website.
Okay,
So that's our yearly maintenance fee for the website.
so we didn't have any last year? it looks like, or
That-
maybe it was,
that- maybe it
was in
was
a
in a
different
later
spot.
period. And so this is, as of January 31st, maybe that bill wasn't paid at that point.
okay,
All right.
all right, thank you.
So, does anyone have any questions, for Kathleen, on the status of the funds? Any comments?
There was something else, but I'll get to it. Just- Oh, for the water fund, so the meters, it looks like are we done with installation of meters, the new meters at this point?
Pretty close, but not 100% complete.
So meter sales, is that
So meter sales, you're talking about on the revenue side?
on the revenue side, yeah?
So that is when a new residence or business is, comes online, they buy a meter through the town.
Okay,
That's what
that's what that
is.
is,
Yeah.
okay.
Like a new,
A new one,
a new home or business.
okay.
Any
Okay.
other questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen, I appreciate it. All right, select board retreat, review of the draft agenda.
Since this was published, Victor reached out and asked that we include climate discussion, following up on the Energy Committee's presentation at the last meeting.
One thing I was thinking about after the ACSD meeting last night and learning that the superintendent is one of the top 3 candidates for a position in Burlington, that I wanted to maybe, and I know Victor had mentioned this a month or so ago, more of a presence in the school. So maybe if there's, I know we have a huge list and long agenda, but it may be inappropriate to put time, depending on how that situation evolves, to be more aware of what's going on with the district, given that situation, so.
Yeah, well, I think, in the college, because the college really does have the technical expertise to address the problem of climate change and of the crisis that and I think this grew out of the concern that the college and the town really need to collaborate in having some kind of plan of how are we going to deal with the current crisis. And as I say, they have the resources that the town really needs, and they seem to be quite willing to provide them. So I think that probably after town meeting, that would be the place to start. I know Lori Patton is very eager to engage in this, so I think it would be an opportunity for us. But it would go down. I mean, I think part of the problem of the whole question of the environmental crisis is the fact that people don't know about it, or they really haven't really got it into their heads. So it's an education process, obviously, and that would go down into the schools, I should hope. Yeah.
Okay. So we're scheduled for retreat on Tuesday the 17th. That's still good with everyone?
17th of March?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Tuesday the 17th. So we have a busy month.
That's St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
Good. You coming in with your shamrocks on?
Green light.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big business day.
Kiss me, I'm Irish.
Oh, yeah, of course, praise the Lord.
So we have town meeting the 2nd, regular select board the 10th, retreat the 17th, and then regular select board again on the 24th. So is there anything else we should discuss? The meeting schedule, we'll talk about the meeting schedule at the retreat. This is just a draft for review, correct?
Right. Just one thing I wanted to highlight, based on an idea from one of my colleagues in the northern part of the state. I'm suggesting that we start the budget review at the select board level a little bit earlier this year, in November, scheduling some time for review before your regularly scheduled meeting. So coming in at 4:30, focusing for 2 hours on the budget exclusively, and then go into your regular business meeting. That will get us in a good position going into December and the busy holiday season.
It's a good idea.
Sounds good. Great.
I'll miss it.
You can come.
I know.
Every other Tuesday night, she'd be standing out there waiting for Brian to pick her up, right? Okay, any other comments on the retreat? Good? Okay, approval of the check warrants. Victor?
Yes, okay, I move that we approve total expenditures in the amount of $472,130.10, consisting of $361,173.57 in accounts payable, and $110,956.53 in payroll. For the period February 12th, 2020 through February 26th, 2020.
Second.
Thank you, Farhad. Thank you, Victor. Any questions? Good. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Town managers report.
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, great. I thought the Cross Street Bridge summary was great. Thank you for keeping us up to date on that. Wonderful. Okay, board member concerns. Lindsay?
I don't have anything at this time.
Thank you. Victor? No?
Oh, my goodness, I have some love. So I just want to say thank you to my fellow select board members.
Well, I was salivating, so I'm
And,
taking
I
our
know, please pass them down. I know.
Oh, I was gonna put one in my pocket. I'll send one down to Kathleen.
Yeah, this one's for Jim.
I
Okay.
would like to express a concern or just a heartfelt wish that, Laura, I think we'll miss you, and I think what you brought to the select board is a wonderful sense of decency and compassion, and thank you for it.
Thank you, Victor, and I appreciated our time together last week, and I know that we'll have another chance to be recognized at town meeting, and I appreciate that. I really have enjoyed my work on the board, and I will still be involved in the work of the board, just on the other side of the table. So I look forward to continuing to see you and reporting on that work.
I think I'm in denial that this is your last official meeting.
I know people ask me, what will I do with all my free time? And I say, do you know me?
Don't need to ask that question.
So,
Great. Thank you, Laura.
you're welcome.
Farhad?
Yeah, okay. I think losing a loved one is pretty hard, and losing a family member whose loved one is even harder, and losing a father is heartbreaking, and losing two people in the same family within a week it's unimaginable. So
Yeah.
I don't know what Brian and Nan's going through. I have my heartfelt condolences to them. Hope our sympathies, our thoughts, and healing prayers for them. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing about Laura, thank you so much for sitting with us for the past 3 years. I look up to you as a mentor. Your passion is unimaginable, I think. So thank you for being with us, and I hope we stay connected. And the third thing about, I wanted to ask you, Brian mentioned that you and Brian would try to meet with MREMs.
Yes,
Did you?
Heather, Brian, and I met with Middlebury Regional EMS, and they assured us that they are in good financial stead on the everyday operating of their entity, but we're in urgent need of a couple of ambulances. Their capital planning has not been what it could be, and they're finding themselves in urgent need of 2 ambulances. So based on that meeting, they sent us their current audit and a capital replacement plan, which is part of the town meeting presentation included in your packet.
So I had some more people approach us. I don't know if anybody else has been approached about, they're showing concern that it's the biggest thing is the jump from $21,000 to $84,000.
Right.
And I had another agency who approached me and said, can we do that too? Can we do quadruple on what we ask?
Yep.
Is it okay to do that? And I said, well, I can't advise you on what you should do or not, but, so people are concerned about that. And they want to know what, another question was asked was, once you approve that 84,000, whatever it is, would that be consistent every year? Would that continue on every year, or is this a one-time thing? The $84,000 they're asking, is that a one-time thing, or is that a?
Well, no, their
It
budget
sets a precedent, right?
has increased by 300%
Yeah.
of the budget that they're asking, and I think this is a regular, in other words, it's a jump.
Yeah.
Will continue.
So to that,
That's a good
2
point of
things.
clarification.
We asked to meet with them earlier, much earlier, at the end of June, going into next year's budget season, to be better informed. And also, the board can, with any public service, social service agency, review their request annually and review the amount.
So it was a good, productive meeting, I think, with them the other day, and we had some suggestions for them moving forward, and I think as we go forward, we'll see some improvement in their planning, and hopefully experience a jump like this.
But the question is,
Does it
if
go
we are
back?
approving 84, it's going to stay at 84 unless something, it's not going to go down, right, on its own?
I wouldn't imagine so,
Their request.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, is this a one-time request just to get them out of the?
Right.
Mm,
that's what
They
it's not.
have a significant rolling stock. Each ambulance is about $250,000 fully equipped, and they have like $42,000, Heather, in the bank for those pieces of equipment. They have 4 ambulances.
Yep. Or 3 in a van, or anyway, some combination of 4 ambulances.
Well,
That's
I think
difficult.
that the problem is that they haven't really ever had an accurate picture of what their ongoing expenses are. And I mean, it seems to me just as we do with fire trucks and police cruisers and so on, you plan ahead and you recognize that, and they haven't been doing this now. They're obviously setting up plan to do this in future. However, it seems to me that this request is not simply paying off expenses and they'll go back down. It seems to me that this is really an indication of what they will be asking in the future for this service, and it's a very important service, obviously. What they need is a financial manager. I think they provide the service that they give very well, but they've been deficient in financial management. I think this would be, and
Maybe we should discuss this at the retreat about what our standards should be, how we fund these agencies.
Again, it'll come up at the town meeting, I'm sure that's what you're saying, because you've heard it, and I'm sure when this item comes up, people will maybe bringing that up. You know, how do we arrive at the totals that we do, and then we will have to respond to that again about what our current protocol has been, and how we will look at that again.
So that, this is our policy that you included here, correct?
An excerpt, yeah.
Yeah.
It still won't satisfy the social service agency that sees this increase and then wants to also exponentially increase their ask.
Okay. Were you all set, Brian?
Yes,
Okay.
I feel like you've taken everything I was going to say. But yeah, I have heard on this MRAMS thing, and say once again, this is not the people who respond are phenomenal professionals at the highest level, and we need them, we value them. But the point that's coming up is, once again, this is an organization that will be the largest recipient of funding that's not under our town manager's oversight. And so if this does get passed, I think we owe it to the community to closely scrutinize this going forward. I mean, somebody pointed out one other interesting little topic I hadn't thought about, but you know, the taxpayers pay for the fire department. And if we have a fire, we need them, they respond, they do their job, we don't get a bill. If we need the police, which taxpayers fund, they respond, they do their job, we don't get a bill. What would happen, you know, is there something that we as taxpayers could get in return for this? You know, maybe a discount on a transport if we needed it, as opposed to getting that big bill. It seems there's a lot of discussions, and it's, in my mind, I see some things even in resource allocation that make me wonder what about this. So I think if this does pass, we owe it to the community to really look at this closely, because it could lead to some of those situations also that Fahad's talked about. So I've said my piece on this one here, and that's where that is. But second of all, of course, I couldn't have said better what you said for Brian and Nan. You know, I think we all sank really low when we got the word there. You know, there was we were passing around the word to each other, and there was this silence that just kind of held over all of us, because, well, we're all friends, and that's a hard hit. Then going away, it's like, swan song, Laura, it's been an honor serving with you, and really your dedication and your commitment. I mean, people know you do that, but they don't know all of what you do. I mean, you've just been a fantastic part of this board, so it's been great serving with you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thanks for sitting next to me tonight. I will certainly miss you, so thank you for everything. And I think you guys have said what you said about Brian, and it's tough. So my heart goes out to both of them, his whole family. So. All right. Thank you. Executive session, briefly. Okay. Laura, would you like to take us in?
In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law, the following, well, let's see, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of legal matters would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its litigation strategy if it discusses the legal matters in public.
Second.
Thank you, Farhad. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss legal matters under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Second.
Thank you, Nick. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So we're entering executive session at 8:42.